What made you enter the race for the top office of the Tibetan polity this time?
Well, first of all, Tasha, like to all the viewers of and followers of Payul. And as I just mentioned in my interview with the Tibetan journalist, initially I wasn't really planning on standing as a candidate for the upcoming Sikyong elections. As many of you know, I had the opportunity 5 years ago, and people really came out in big numbers and supported my candidacy and the vision and plan that I had laid out. So my hope this past few months was that during this current election season, that we would see the emergence of some new voices, some new leaders and new faces, which is really, really important, I think, for the long-term resilience and sustainability of the Tibetan freedom movement and the CTA and our exile community. But as many of you know, while I see a lot of activity and campaigning happening at the Chitu, the MP level, for some reason, we have not seen, or at least as far as anyone coming out and openly declaring that they want to run as a Sikyong in the ongoing election. Now, this one I think it's a very important issue because, as many of you know, our exiled Tibetan democracy is really a gift from His Holiness the Dalai Lama, who, as we speak, is residing a few steps here above on top of Lhagyal Ri hill. And this is something which is really, I think, a gem, for the exile community, because it's much, much easier for a freedom movement and for an exile community to just follow one leader, to have just one voice and just one face representing the movement and make it very top-down, right? It's much harder, and it requires much more commitment to go down the path of democracy and kind of transparency. But I think it's to the credit of His Holiness the Dalai Lama and our elders that they set this community down this path of being fully committed to democracy. But having said that, as I said in Tibetan, there are three main requirements for a functioning democracy. One is you have to have elections on time. And secondly, you have to have good, credible candidates, right? And thirdly, people need to participate in big numbers. Now, in this ongoing Sikyong election, of course, we're having the election. February 1st is the first round, and then April 26th is the final election. But on a more disturbing and a concerning note, we just haven't had enough candidates who are openly declaring and campaigning. And I think that also raises question about then, is there enough interest, within the electorate? And if both those things would happen, no credible candidates and then low turnout, then I think the entire legitimacy and the credibility of the Tibetan exile democracy can be questioned. And I think it'll be quite embarrassing to have to explain both internally and especially to the external community, the world community, that the highest political office, for the exiled Tibetan government and community, that there were no one, challenging the incumbent, which I think would be very, very unfortunate. So that was the major reason why I reconsidered my initial decision not to run and to, I guess, jump in the fray. And of course, there are other reasons also, but the second reason, which I just explained to our Tibetan journalists, is I'm seeing a significant decline in our exile community, decline in the strength of our Tibetan freedom movement, and then in terms of the unity amongst ourselves in the exile community, and then also the financial health of the CTA. And I think it's really high time that we have a leader, a Tibetan leader, who puts the Tibetan freedom struggle front and center. Because this is the reason why His Holiness had to leave Tibet and why there is an exile government just below the hill in Kangchen Kishong, and why all of us are, here in exile and in diaspora. So I think we have to refocus, we have to rebalance the whole exile setup and move away or have less emphasis on administration and more towards the freedom struggle, the cause, and the freedom movement by devoting more resources, by coming up with new strategies, by building alliances, right? And that's what I intend to do if people if people were to support me. And then also, I think in terms of the financial health, as many of you know, we've taken some big hits over the last 7 months in terms of loss of foreign aid from the U.S. government, which until a year ago was almost $14 million annually, which is a lot of money for a small community like ours. But that all went away, and even though I believe that 7 million has been reinstated, but that money has not been received to date, and we're already into the fourth quarter of the CTA's fiscal year. So I think it's not clear whether that money is going to come through as well, right? And so if people were to put their trust and support in me, I will not only recover the lost funding, but I'm quite confident that I can actually even increase, foreign aid. But not just foreign aid. I think the time has now come to really take on more of the responsibility and burden, because now many Tibetans are doing quite well financially and economically. And I think we have to now really look seriously inward and question ourselves in terms of how long can we keep extending our hands, right? And how much of the responsibility that, we should take on ourselves. And that's something I intend to steer the community towards, if I'm given the responsibility.
Ingula, you are now the second candidate to formally enter the race for the highest office of the Tibetan polity, alongside the incumbent CTA President Rempa Sringla. However, the incumbent CTA president has stated that he will not campaign or even participate in debates or sit for interviews during the election, despite seeking another term.
Right.
Some members of the public have expressed concern that this approach may limit democratic engagement. How do you view his decision to not participate in public discussions during this crucial period?
Okay, just to clarify and also to educate the community, I think the incumbent is always limited in terms of formally campaigning, right? Of course, he has his stage, and he visits settlements and he visits the electorate, everywhere. And this Sikyong in particular, one of the pledges that he has kept is his pledge that he made 5 years ago, that he will visit every Tibetan community settlement twice. And I think he's probably done that. But so I think that naturally that is a platform that the incumbent always has. But for him to openly campaign for a second term, I think the election charter prohibits that. He can participate in debate, but my understanding is that whether you are a sitting MP or a sitting Sikyong, you can't openly campaign because, for obvious reasons. But having said that, I think the decision not to somehow limit, the whole election activity, and also the decision not to participate in debate is really unfortunate. And I think it really it damages our exile democracy. And as I stated 5 years ago as well, I support 100% the need and the importance for debates. And I openly request both the incumbent as well as any other candidates who might enter the race that we need to have at least 2 debates, one in Tibetan and one in English, because this is the responsibility. This is one of the prerequisites for a healthy democracy, to put yourself in front of the community, to put yourself in front of the electorate, and to explain your vision and why you're running in person, and then to take questions, The questions may be difficult, the questions may be easy, whatever. But regardless of the nature of the questions, it is the basic responsibility, both morally as well as politically, to put yourself in front of the community and have that interaction. So I 100% support the holding of debates, and I hope the Election Commission will seriously look into it, both ideally both in the first and in the final round, but if not, at least in one of the rounds, I think we have to have debate, because that was also what happened 5 years ago, right? Yeah.
You also ran in the 2021 presidential election and lost by a margin of 5,417 votes in the final round. As you enter the 2026 race, how confident are you about earning the public mandate this time?
I'm 100% confident. I would not be running. I would not be putting myself through this whole process, which is quite challenging, right? It's challenging on multiple levels, personally, financially, and just also mentally. So I am in this race to win. And I came very close 5 years ago, but this time I feel like one of the reasons why I may have come a close second 5 years ago was because my opponent was running for the third time, I think. And I think one of the reasoning, constant explanation that I found both during the campaign and also post-election was, okay, this person has run several times, so let's give him an opportunity. So now I think the current incumbent has had the opportunity. So people have had the experience of seeing him in office for 5 years. And whether you support him or whether you're not happy with his performance, I think the record is there, right? So I feel like that's something which I can appeal to the voters. And if people, again, if they give me an opportunity, I'm very, very confident that I can deliver on some of the commitments I plan to make during the course of the campaigning.
And Kungula, in your campaign manifesto, you have emphasized on unity. And there is a perception that Tibetan politics in exile has become more polarized.
Right.
Practically speaking, what will you do differently to bridge the regional as well as sectarian divides in our community?
Okay. Yeah. Well, I think the first and the foremost emphasis should be on the freedom struggle, right? Because everything should be beneath that. Because as I said earlier as well, our whole reason for being here and having this interview and being in the surrounding is because we are in exile. So we have to really just keep that front and center. And for us to be successful in our freedom struggle, we have to be united and we have to have the resources. So unity is so important. And this is, I think, not just my view, but I think both in terms of where our community is heading, we have become polarized, we have become factionalized. And, I think there could be a lot of reasons for that. But I think the first and foremost, the person at the top, and in this case, the person occupying the Sikyong's office, he or she needs to set the example. So in my announcement 2 days ago, I said the same thing, and I'm going to repeat here. If people give me an opportunity to be their Sikyong, I'm going to be the Sikyong for all Tibetans, not for one faction or the other. And through personal example and through giving less emphasis on the self and putting more importance on the collective, I think that's where I think we need to make this more than about just one person, right? Because one person, unless he is His Holiness the Dalai Lama, there's just no way that one person can do everything. So that's why, as we also discussed during the earlier Tibetan interview as well, it's really, really important to have 7 people in the Kashal, because we have 7 portfolios and we have to have all 7 people collectively putting in their effort and their talent. And I think we have to make CTA more relevant and more present in people's lives, because 15, 20 years ago, it was okay to do what we're doing now because everybody was more or less in India, Nepal, and Bhutan. But now, more than half of our exile community have moved overseas. And so there's almost like a third community, as I would say. The home community is in Tibet, where 99% of our people reside. 1% in exile, right? But in exile, we have now South Asia, India, Nepal, and Bhutan. And now you have Tibetans in almost 25 countries. So I think it's very, very important for CTA to bridge that gap with the diaspora community. Obviously, for various reasons, we cannot establish direct ties with our people in Tibet. But those of us who are outside Tibet, we have the freedom, we have the resources, we have the right. So I think the more you make CTA relevant and meaningful and present in every Tibetan's lives, whether they live in India or abroad, that will help in uniting. That will help in forging that common identity. So that's where I feel like those are some of the areas where I'm seeing some deficit and some decline. So, and that's what I intend to address here.
Coming to the final question on your campaign manifesto, you have referred to look north strategy.
Yes.
Can you briefly explain what that means in practical terms for engagement on Tibet?
Right. Well, as part of my effort to rebalance CTA and our effort more from administration over to the struggle, the cause, and the freedom movement, one of my centerpiece initiatives is going to be what I'm calling the Look North policy, which, to explain very briefly, is focusing on the India-Tibet, the Nepal-Tibet border, where we have a significant number of Tibetans living in settlements all across the border, right? But more importantly, or as importantly, we have the Himalayan people who are citizens of their host countries with all their rights and all their freedom. And these are ties that go back centuries, right? Historical, cultural, spiritual, people-to-people social interactions. And even though right now there are efforts being made to maintain those ties, but I feel much more can be done. So if people were to give me an opportunity to be their Sikyong, I intend to come up with a very strategic plan of building alliances with our Himalayan brothers and sisters, investing in resources along the border, and encouraging our Tibetan community members to really further solidify their presence, right, in places like Ladakh, Sikkim, Arunachal Pradesh, and parts of Himachal, because this is where we are facing our home, right, Tibet. And look at what the Chinese government is doing. They are not just the massive infrastructure development, but also they are settling, entire population on the north side of the border and building towns and I wouldn't say cities, but little towns and villages. They're not doing this because, out of generosity or out of any, they see an economic benefit. It's all for strategic reasons. So even though we can match, even though there is this asymmetrical kind of a relationship in terms of resources and power, but I think we should really pay attention. And I think we cannot just be absorbed with what's happening in Central, South, and and other parts of India where we have much more people, obviously. But we really need to take a different look, a second look at what more can we be doing across the border, all across the border from India to Nepal, right? And what can we do in terms of making sure that our presence there is not diminished, and what are some of the initiatives and activities that we can take to further strengthen the bonds that we have with the Himalayan people. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks so much. Yeah.